Do we have any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we'll then go to item or recommend item return to school update motion. Trustee Lundquist, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Can hear you well. Yep.
Thank you. So on Monday evening, I introduced a motion in respect of school opening plans because of significant concerns I had with the government's lack of appropriate and safe planning for students, but also because I had heard from, at that time, 150 or so parents and educators who were deeply concerned about the plans as well. Since Monday night, I have had more time to review the motion, and I actually would like to make an amendment to B, and I've provided that to trustees. I'm having some technical trouble, so I'm hoping that one of the trustees can help me with the language of it, because I can't actually open my school board computer right now. It is on a recycling, trying to restart itself, and I can't actually get to those things. So if maybe Trustee Forbes would read the amendment for me, I would be very appreciative of that.
Sure. So I'll just confirm this is the amendment that was sent to trustees at 9:33 this morning. So this is to delete subsection 2B and to substitute it with an amended section 2B that reads as follows: authorizing the Director of Education to implement any and all measures that the Director may deem necessary and appropriate to best ensure a minimum of 1 meter spacing for students, including but not limited to measures such as reorganizing classes, providing portable classrooms, using common areas as classroom space, redeploying staff, hiring additional school staff, and such other measures as the Director may deem appropriate.
Thank you. So that amendment's moved by yourself, Trustee Lundquist, and seconded by Trustee Templeton again. That being said, we can go to speakers on that. Or do you have anything else you'd like to say about that, Trustee Lundquist?
No, I feel like I had an opportunity to say a lot on Monday evening, and I would like other trustees to have the same opportunities, of course. I do just want to reiterate that I don't make that motion lightly. I recognize that it is the government's responsibility to provide the funding for a safe return to school. And so this motion really is about stepping in where they have failed and doing what I think are things we can reasonably and practically do to try to address some of the gravest concerns that we have, particularly for the youngest of our students who are going to school unmasked. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have our speakers list, Trustee Crawford, then Trustee Forbes. Go ahead, Trustee Crawford.
Okay, thank you. It's a good place to start. To me, it's a little too general. I had the opinion that the board or the staff had already put together a program that fulfilled that 1 meter. The only place it's not fulfilled, and it should be discussed separately, is the transportation item. So I was hoping that we could be a little more specific, and maybe we can do that with amendments to the original motion to be more specific about what do we mean by that. If this is a matter of adding more staff or spending the reserve, those are the things that we should be speaking about, because they're specific enough to pass or fail a motion on that. So isn't it, I'll leave that with a question. Hasn't staff already put together a program that does meet with the 1 meter?
Go ahead, Acting Director Marsh.
Through you, Chair Brainy, thank you for the question. Happy to clarify. Staff presented a plan to trustees 2 nights ago in relation to the ministry's direction in terms of the return to school in September. As part of our planning, we recognized that the Ministry of Education's direction to us was silent on distancing within the classroom. So we therefore turned to the Sick Kids Hospital report from the end of July, where it stated that 1 meter of distancing was for younger students. They were suggesting it was potentially a risk mitigation in terms of the return to school. And so we did then base our plan on 1 meter. And so what we identified though 2 nights ago is that at this stage, until we get all of our students signed up for the virtual school, we don't know how many challenges we have within the district in terms of classrooms. We're currently, custodians are spacing out desks and tables so that students are getting that 1 meter apart. We'll then analyze how many pupil spaces that means for every classroom, and then we'll identify based on the restaffing and the reorganization that will occur once the virtual registration has occurred, and then at that stage identify how many classrooms in our district do not meet the threshold of what we have done in our staff planning but wasn't required by the ministry, which was the 1 meter. After that, our plan was to look first to the school to see if there was a larger space available. Some of our elementary schools, for example, I think there's about 36 of the 110 elementary schools that have a vacant classroom. So we could have a look at were those classrooms larger? Was there a space that we could make use of that was larger than the original classroom? Pending that, we would then report back to the board, and we had set the goal of the week of August 24th, potentially around August 25th, to have exact numbers so that the board would be aware of how many classrooms didn't meet that threshold of the 1 meter apart and the class size was exceeding it. So our plan is attempting to achieve that, but we don't know yet how many classrooms will not meet that requirement. And it's not a requirement of the ministry, it was staff's planning based on the Sick Kids report. I hope that helps clarify.
Thank you. Trustee Forbes, you're up.
Thanks. I have also, and I know we have all, as trustees, received many emails from concerned staff and parents. And social distancing has been a major part of every reopening for every facet of the stages, as well as masking. And I feel that as trustees, anything we can do to make the return to school as safe as possible for students and staff, we must do. And I feel the amended motion, because really any measures that would need to be adopted would be at the discretion of our Director of Education. So I feel that the amended motion does address this, because those are operational considerations. We are simply acknowledging that based on the numbers, we may need to free up the additional funds to support the 1 meter distancing, which we acknowledge from the Sick Kids report. And social distancing is very important to stop the spread of COVID-19. So I am personally in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Trustee Noble, Barnes, and Barrett. Go ahead, Trustee Noble.
Thank you, Chair Brady. I believe that we're speaking to the amendment, so I will focus on that first. But I believe this is an operations issue, therefore the director should have that final say on it, which means I would be in favor of the amended motion. As towards the motion itself, I am still fully in favor of it. Just like everyone else on this board, I've received countless emails in the past 48 hours expressing really deep concerns about class sizes and social distancing. And there was 2 in particular that I wanted to share with the permission, of course, because they struck me as very urgent. And the first one says, as a teacher of our youngest learners, I welcome the idea of returning to the classroom, but I am terrified of the large numbers and no masks. And that stuck out in particular because these are our youngest learners, as we continue to remember, and masks have not been made mandatory for our youngest learners as well. The second one is says, I'm a parent and a kindergarten teacher in Oshawa. I am very concerned with the class sizes. I have 30 students in the fall with a waiting list as it is a French immersion school. Please continue to advocate for smaller class sizes. A few of the other emails that I'm sure we've all received talk about social distancing and how if you were to go to a Walmart, social distancing has to be 2 meters, yet in our classroom, they are 1 meters. And I find that deeply concerning as well, simply because these students are going to be there for the majority of their education career in the classrooms with each other. We know that there's no room for trial and error, and we have to support our students and staff, which means making sure that safety and well-being is our absolute top priority. It is clear that staff and families are very, very passionate about advocating for smaller class sizes, and I believe that it is the right thing to do at this point.
Thank you, Trustee Noble. Trustee Barnes?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear fine.
Okay, so I support the 1 meter distancing for our classrooms. I realize that we can't make classrooms. I mean, the 15 cohort would be awesome compared to the plan that we had where we were doing rotating days, but we can't do that anymore. We don't have enough money in our reserves to fund 50 classroom sizes at 15. We would have to come down to selecting which schools, selecting which classrooms, because we don't have enough money to fund classroom sizes at 15. I support the 1 meter distancing and the thing around the motion in preserving the 1 meter distance. I think the operations and the director gets to make that final call, and funding to make sure that we try as best we can to do 1 meter distancing for all our classrooms. I'm not sure that we will be able to, but the director and the staff will come down to making that decision.
Okay, thank you. So I have Trustee Barrett, Crawford, then Morton. Go ahead, Trustee Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Brainy. First, I'd just like to say, from a process standpoint, we need to stick to speaking to the amendment, not the entire motion. So please, if we could try and restrict that, where there will be time. I am growing a wee bit frustrated because we are not following the process. So secondly, I support the amendment as written. In order to be able to allow the staff. The only piece that I would suggest is that other school boards across the province have approved their return to school plan. And we have not done that as of yet. I recognize we're still talking about it in general, including the motion by Trustee Lundquist plus the amendment. There's still a requirement in my mind that we need to be able to approve the return to school plan, of which this is part. I support the amendment, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Trustee Crawford?
I agree we should be speaking to the amendment, and it's a little difficult to not get on to something else, but let's just go with the amendment for this time being, and I'll add something later.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Morton?
Thank you, and through you, Chair Brainy, I was going to make the same comment that Trustee Michael Barrett and Trustee Paul Crawford has made. We are dealing with the amendment at the present time. Thank you.
Trustee Templeton?
I just wanted to speak about the amendment. I do support it 100%, and of course I put my name up to second, and I think we already established that. I too, like everybody else, has had many emails, and I believe that does give the directive proper direction through the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further speakers, did you say something, Trustee Crawford, that you wanted to come back to the amended section?
Oh, what I was going to say, if we pass the amendment, and then I would break it down a little more, either with a question or amendment that was more specific.
Okay, well, let's take a vote on the amended motion then. So on the amended motion that was put before us, all in favor? You can just click the yes, okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, we're just voting on the amendment.
Correct.
Not the amended motion.
Okay, that carries. Any opposed? I don't see any. Okay, that carries. So now we're back to, so the amendment has been accepted and carried, so we're back to the motion then. Would you like to speak to this again, Trustee Lundquist?
I don't feel that, I feel like I need to give the floor to the other trustees, Chair Brainy. I have been really clear, I think, about the rationale for the motion, and I recognize that other trustees have not had that opportunity to engage with it in the same way that I have as the drafter. So if I may, I'd like to just remain silent for now and allow the trustees to voice their views of it.
Okay, thank you. So to the motion, Trustee Edwards.
At this time, I would like to move to divide the motion, and before it's said that it goes back to the person who provided the motion, I consulted Robert's Rules of Order, and you can get it verified that when a motion is divided, any trustee can do that, and it's considered like an amendment. So therefore, it needs a seconder and a simple majority. So I move to divide the motion, the question.
Okay, so you've moved it. Do you have we have a seconder for that? Trustee Morton.
Mr. Chair, if I may, to separate those questions, it doesn't require a seconder. It can be done with just a request of one trustee.
It does require a seconder.
That's what I certainly had believed, it required a seconder also. Actually, let's go to Council Cotter. What's the ruling on that?
Yes, my advice, Chair Brainy, would be that my reading of Robert's rules, it requires a seconder.
Okay, thank you. So that being said, we have a seconder, Trustee Morton. All in favor?
But there is, Chair.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, Chair Brainy, there is no debate on it, though. It's just moves.
Correct. We just go right to, so could we take a vote on that? All in favor of that amendment? See, 5 yes, 3 no. Is there anyone that hasn't voted yet? Okay, that carries then. So moving forward, as far as breaking down the motion and putting it in sections, are there any sections that you're thinking of, Trustee Edwards, that you want it broken down into? I don't think we can hear you, Donna.
Donna, you're on mute.
Sorry. And that it's section 3. The rest, as far as that, I think we need further discussion.
Okay. Trustee Crawford?
Well, I guess we'll have to know what section 3 is. What specifically?
Section 3 is the DDSB authorizes the board to use reserve funds of up to 1% of the board's 2020 budget to facilitate the adoption of mitigation measures to keep students and staff as safe as possible. But I just think that we need to look at, as well as the plan. We need to, as Trustee Barrett said, we actually need to approve the plan. So I think we just need to make sure that the wording is correct, which is section 1.
So I would suggest that we frame it and vote on the other sections in that motion. And then we go back to that section 3 and we have a discussion on that. Is that okay with everyone?
Well, it's section 3 that's in front of us right now. She just put it there.
Yeah, but we're going to vote on and speak to the remainder of it. Then we can go back to section 3 and have a discussion and take a vote on that. Why don't we get the other stuff out of the way, Trustee Crawford? That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that when you decide to separate it, you separate all of the items and deal with them individually. It also gives people an opportunity to add to the motion with maybe a specific amendment. Now, the one that Donna has put forward here is one of the most important ones, because we need to determine what will be the effect of going into our reserves, and will there be any benefit to it. So if we stay with that one, because it's certainly one of the most important ones, we need to determine and make a decision as to whether or not we're willing to go into our reserves and what the effect of that will be.
I understand that, Trustee Crawford. I guess my concern is, as a chair, is I don't want us spinning our wheels in circles and causing confusion. I think there's ways of simplifying things to getting to the point of what the intent is of the motion and what the will of the trustees are regarding it. So I'll go to Trustee Lundquist, Barrett, and Morton.
So from a practical standpoint, in terms of working our way through it, does it not make sense to go clause by clause? Start at the beginning and work our way through. And if there's no objection to one, then we move to 2, to A, to B, to C. To me, that is the most logical way of getting through all of the material. And then we vote at the end on whatever the clauses are independently or whatnot. But to me, it just practically makes sense to work our way through it and have a fulsome discussion in light of the importance of the various elements that are contained within the motion.
I would agree with that too. That's what I'm trying to do too, Trustee Lundquist, is to simplify it, keep it simple for everybody, not only around this table, but for people watching online. Go ahead, Trustee Barrett.
I was going to suggest the same thing. When you divide a motion, you can't lump things together. We have to vote on each clause. I'd agree with Trustee Lundquist. Let's just start at number 1 and just work through it clause by clause. And I think some Chair Brainy will be quite simple. If anyone here is going to argue about writing a letter to the ministry, I would be rather doubtful. But if we just work through it, and obviously number 3 is going to come up at the 3rd point. So
it'll come up at some point.
Yeah.
Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Brainy, I would like to make some general comments that relate to the entire motion. I've also got some general questions that I would everyone to recognize that we have the same goal here. We all want to open our schools safely, protecting our students, our staff, our parents, our entire school community. That's our utmost responsibility. We do not want repercussions in the following months. The province of Ontario has done reasonably well in bringing our COVID numbers down, but we must remain vigilant and insist that sufficient safety measures are in place to protect our students and our staff. We must be proactive. We cannot afford to be reactive. We need to seek additional funding from the province in order to provide greater assurance to our school communities. Today, we are assessing and considering the resources that we have at our disposal. We then need to deploy those resources in the best possible way to meet the urgent and immediate needs of our school population. My first question is regarding staffing. We all realize the importance of smaller class sizes, bubbles, where we can aptly manage student interaction. We have many staff members who are qualified teachers who are not assigned classrooms. They are facilitators, they are coaches, or they serve in other similar capacities. Instead of hiring new teachers to reduce class size, have we or could we ever consider redeploying these staff members back into our schools to become classroom teachers? To me, this challenging time calls for all hands on deck. I question them for Director Marsh or Associate Director Kisco. Is this possible? And if so, what would those numbers look like? Is this doable? Thank you.
Wait, can I just ask a question quickly? Point of order, are we not discussing the first motion? Should we not be addressing the motion that is in front of us? I thought we were following the process of discussing motions.
I would agree. I think it's a lot easier if there's questions that we go through this right from number one and work our way down. If there's questions that people have that they want to ask staff regarding any of those sections or clauses, I would recommend that's a chance to do it. Or it's just going to be too confusing. We're just going to be spinning our wheels and spinning and spinning and spinning. Let's just go through this like we decided to. Let's keep it simple. So if we can go to clause 1 and work our way down from that. So clause 1 is, could somebody read that out for, I think we all have it in front of us, but people that don't, that might be watching, can I have somebody read that clause out?
I can.
Thank you.
So this is from the original motion. This is section 1. The DDSB adopt the plan as provided in respect of secondary students, which provides for both in-class learning and virtual learning opportunities and smaller cohorts, understanding that the board has been designated as adaptive/blended by the province and cannot at this time return to 5 days of in-class learning for secondary students. Should the DDSB seek to implement adaptations of the plan, which may be necessary to ensure equitable access to educational opportunities, particularly in rural communities, the Board of Trustees will be apprised of any intended changes to the plan and informed of what steps are being taken to ensure student and staff safety.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. As we go through this, could I ask a favor of you if you could go through each clause as we work our way down? That would be terrific.
Sure.
Thanks for your assistance on that. Thank you. So to that, Trustee Lundquist.
So I just wanted to clarify that the intention of the second part was actually reflective of Trustee Morton's concerns about rural areas and the need to potentially implement a different kind of programming in those areas where there are internet issues, where there are no cases, where risks are different. So that was the intention of that, and I just wanted to be clear about that. The second point I'd like to raise, and I actually wrote it on the screen and I don't know that anybody's acknowledged it, was that I would like to have a voice vote, viva voce vote on all of these amendments, because everybody's not on the screen. And I think I think it's important that people understand what is happening.
We can do that. It's not an issue. Trustee Forbes.
You're muted, darling.
Sorry about that. I think this makes a lot of sense. I just wasn't sure without a change in direction from the ministry, and this would be a question for Acting Director Marsh, without a change from the ministry, and I know the question was raised about rural areas with low instances of COVID-19 returning to a 5-day, and they weren't at this point, hadn't given any direction to change that. Is that correct?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Brainy, that is correct. Trustee Forbes, we have registered the concern of constituents or our families from throughout the district, in particular areas where there's low or no cases of COVID and very small secondary schools. We have registered that concern multiple times, and the Ministry of Education has not said that they're closed to the notion of it, but they are not yet ready to change their direction to us. And they have been very clear that that is, they deem that to be their decision and a direction to us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Trustee Edwards?
You're muted.
Donna, you're on mute again.
Sorry. I was just going to say I want to thank Trustee Lindquist for the clarification, because I agree with the intent of it. The only problem is the first sentence says to adopt the plan, recognizing, so we're actually adopting the whole plan. And the second part is where we want the change. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that we are, what really the intent is the second part, whereas that, because at the very end, we think we should have a motion to adopt the plan. But anyways, the second part is to ensure for basically staff to continue to seek the implementation of options of the plan where the needs have changed. So I'm not sure whether the first sentence or the first part of the sentence is the DDS adopt the plan, but we do want to recognize that it is this is specific to the secondary students. So I think we just eliminate the adopt at this point in time and just say that we recognize the plan as put forth by the ministry around that. So I'm just trying to work the wording so we make minimal changes there, but so that we are recognizing the intent of the motion. Thank you.
Since your motion, Trustee Lindquist, are you fine with that? Is that your intent for the first section?
I'm sorry, that actually didn't provide me any clarity. I don't actually understand what Trustee Edwards means.
What I'm saying is the first sentence says the DDSB adopt the plan as provided in, okay, I guess in respect of the secondary students, but we're saying we're adopting the plan as a whole, basically as a whole, and that should be a separate motion. What I recognize your intent was that we're outlining what the ministry has said, what we had to do is the adaptive model. And on that, we are continuing, we want staff to continue to seek adaptations of the plan where possible, because we have different needs and to support those needs of the students. So it's just the adopt part, because at the very end of the meeting, we should adopt the plan as Trustee Barrett had said. That's all. So your intent, I agree with the intent. It's just I'm worried that we put it the adopt the plan, people might confuse things.
I'm unclear on what it is you're requesting that I do with it, though, or what the board does with it, because there's not a suggestion about a change in language specifically. It's a concern that you're expressing, and I don't share the concern. I read it in sort of basic principles of statutory interpretation that say you read every word with meaning. And so I don't share the same concern. I think and I don't, it's not my place to speak to everything that trustees want to raise, but if you're asking me, Chair Brainy, if I'm amenable to a change, I don't know what that change is. So it's hard for me to be amenable to it. I think the language is relatively clear. I think it says very clearly, we adopt the plan that we have no choice but to adopt in terms of secondary students, but we continue to essentially advocate for changes where they are possible or desirable.
What I suggest is that we change is that the DDSB recognizes the ministry directed plan of of the alternate adaptive blended model by the provinces to return 5 days of classes and that this time cannot. I just saying get rid of the adopt. That's all. We recognize that the DDSB should seek to implement adaptations of the plan, which may consider. So it's just getting rid of the word of adopt. That's all.
Trustee Crawford, before I go to Trustee Crawford, once again, I'd just like to ask, there are many people online. I don't want to cause any confusion. I want clarity. Let's try to keep this as simple as possible moving forward. Trustee Crawford, go ahead.
I guess it's difficult to keep it as simple as possible because of the wording of it, and I understand what the intent of it is, but as Donna pointed out, we're saying adopt at one time, and then we're going to look at things the other. Like my question on this one, what does this specifically do as far as class size is concerned, and what does it specifically do as far as reaching into the reserves is concerned? So maybe we can either set this aside and go to the next one, because I think what we're looking for is clarity.
Trustee Crawford, I think we all agree that we're going to go down from one right down the bottom. And I think switching gears at this stage isn't what we're going to do.
Or blended, which provides for learning and virtual learning opportunities from
You're unmuted.
By the province.
Christine, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
She wasn't singing. Well, can I suggest then?
But I could sing, Paul. I could sing a few notes.
Okay. I'll get my keyboard out. No, maybe we should take the suggestion that Donna's saying and drop the word adopt and then vote on the other one, because I see what the confusion is. I would be willing to vote on it, drop the word adopt, vote on it, and move on to the next one.
Okay, Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Brainy. I was just wondering if I could be a little specific. I do understand the meaning of this part of the motion, and I just understand the benefit of it. I was just wondering if it would make any difference to Trustee Lundquist if we said something around understanding that the board has been designated as adaptive blended by the province, which provides for both in-class learning and virtual learning opportunities in smaller cohorts, and then continue with the rest of it. That just kind of deals with the issue, but I don't think really changes this part of the motion at all. Perhaps that might work. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee Forbes.
I'm fine with the motion as written. I guess I'm a little bit confused if trustees are their suggestions, but are they going to make a motion to amend? Because we've had a couple of different wording options. So should we, I don't know if.
I would agree with you, Trustee Forbes. Was it your intent then to make a motion then, Trustee Edwards, to amend this part too, and then we'll have to have a seconder and then to make a motion on deciding whether that's what we're doing?
Actually, to tell you the truth, I like what Trustee Thatcher, I think it gets across what we're talking about, what her recommendation is, and if she is willing to use that as the amendment, then I would second it, and that's fine.
Okay. So based on that, so Trustee Thatcher's wording, seconded by yourself, Trustee Edwards. So we should have speakers to that before we take a vote. Trustee Barrett.
No, I was going to talk to something else, Chris, so I don't want to talk to this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Council Cotter.
No, Chair Brainy, I have no, my hand is down. I think the process that I was just going to recommend is being followed. To move and second on that limited amendment and vote on that and then back to the main motion.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Lundquist?
I'm just puzzled. And the reason I'm puzzled is because we had said, like, this motion arose in the context of a plan that was being presented to us on Monday. We have acknowledged at the beginning of this meeting that we need to adopt a plan. And so I'm not clear on why we're backing away from language that adopts part of that plan. This doesn't make any sense to me, practically speaking. So I just don't understand the rationale for the amendment at all.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Barrett? Hands down. Okay. So we do have a motion on the wording amendment.
Yeah. So, yeah, sorry, Chris.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I'm going to wade in, but I would support Trustee Lundquist that I agree with Donna that when you pass this, you are adopting it, but I'm okay with adopting it. We're talking about the secondary model. Our biggest concern is with regards to the elementary. There's an adaptive model that's there. I understand that if I vote in favor of the section 1, it does adopt it. I'm okay. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not looking for more wiggle room and more debate on going forward with the secondary plan. So I would agree with Trustee Lundquist. I like it the way it is written as it is.
I would agree with both of you there, but we still have to take a vote on that wording motion. So Trustee Thatcher, seconded by Trustee Edwards. With that wording change, all in favor?
Point of order. I believe that we were going to do voice voting from now on for the viewers at home.
We could. It makes things much difficult for me virtually, but I'll do my best with this. It's going to take a while to go through this. So if everybody would just like to pop in and say yay or nay instead of me going through a list, it's much easier. Go ahead, Trustee Noble, you're first up.
Thank you. I am opposed to the amendment.
Okay. Next.
Starlene, nay.
Okay.
Michael Barrett, opposed.
Okay.
Dot, opposed.
Okay.
Carolyn Morton, opposed.
Okay.
Nikki Lundquist, opposed.
Okay.
Christine, in favor.
Okay.
Therese Barnes, opposed.
Okay. So that carries. That 7 opposed. And
just sorry, Chris, if it's going to be recorded, everybody has to.
Yeah, everybody has to. So I since Donna seconded, we've got Christine, Donna are in favor. We've got 7 that have voiced that they're opposed to it. Are we missing one other? Paul, have you? I don't believe you've expressed where you're at with it. Are you opposed or in favor?
Abstaining.
Abstaining? Okay. All right. I think that's been recorded, so that carries. So then we go back to the original intent of clause 1. If we could then, do we have any speakers to that, or can we just move forward with that, which is what I would suggest. Seeing now, let's take a vote on the clause as how it was written. We will record this again too. So if everybody once again can be patient here, and let's go. I would say, Trustee Lundquist, why don't you express what your vote is on clause 1?
I'm obviously in favor of clause 1.
I figured that, but I can't.
Yep.
I can't suggest that.
No, I know that. Thank you.
Wow, this is really fun. I just love these virtual meetings.
Patrice, in favor?
In favor, yes. Okay.
Michael
Christine,
Barrett.
in favor.
Michael, Christine in favor, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Ashley's in favor.
Ashley, yes.
Donna's in
All.
favor.
Donna, yes.
All's in favor.
All's in favor.
Carolyn
in
Morton,
favor.
in favor.
Let's just say, let's make it simple. Is anybody opposed? None. Okay, so everyone's in favor of clause 1. Okay, we're making some progress, folks. So then we go, let's go down to clause 2.
Clause 2. Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to be clear.
Please tell me you're not going to add wording to it.
Well, this is, I just want to confirm, this is the amend.
Yeah, I'm kidding you.
Okay. So I just have to piece together my 2 emails. Just bear with me a moment. I'm sorry.
Chair, may I make a comment that we voted on clause 2, and that's why I think where Trustee Forbes is getting confused is it was amended.
Correct.
And we actually deleted, okay, so it was just B part was deleted, but I'm not sure how, I think it somewhat affects A as well. I'm not 100% sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's where I think Trustee Forbes might be a little confused too.
So we're, yes, you're, yeah. Don't mean to add to that confusion. So where are we next? Where are we next then, Trustee Forbes?
So I just, if you'll just bear with me, I'm just going to take a moment to copy because, and add in the amendment. So I get this correct. Pardon me, just bear with me a moment. Okay. There we go. Okay, so delete subsection 2B. Okay. So I believe I have this correct now. The DDSB adopt the plan for virtual learning for elementary students and adjust its plan for students electing to return to in-person learning by A, ensuring all classes allow for the distancing of students at a minimum of 1 meter as recommended in the guidance document relied upon by the government for other aspects of reopening plan. And B, this is the amendment that we voted and passed earlier. B, authorizing the Director of Education to implement any and all measures that the Director may deem necessary and appropriate to best ensure a minimum of 1 meter spacing for students, including but not limited to measures such as reorganizing classes, providing portable classrooms, using common areas as classroom space, redeploying staff, hiring additional school staff, and such other measures as the Director may deem appropriate. I hope I've captured that correctly.
I believe you have, Trustee Forbes. Thank you. So in this section, I'll go to Trustee Edwards.
I just want a clarification from Trustee Lindquist is that it is not clause, we replaced clause B, we've already voted on it. Does not clause A really been covered by clause B? I'm not 100% sure. Is there something other that is different? I just want some clarification.
Give me one moment while I actually have my computer up and running finally, so I can actually look at the language. Just give me 1 second, please.
Chris, while Nikki is doing that, can we get is it appropriate to get staff to weigh in on implications of this or any say they might have in this? Or do we have to wait until we've decided?
Yeah, Chris, I have questions on that too.
So I'm just going to say this, no motion is going to be perfect when drafted rapidly. I think the point is to offer, in A, is to offer a rationale for the adoption of the 1 meter distancing, which again, I don't personally think is enough, but it really is to recognize that that is something that the experts at Sick Kids have recommended in their report, and that the government has relied on that report for other purposes. And that is the rationale behind the other measures that I'm hoping we adopt. So if we want to blend the two, so it's a single clause, I have no discomfort with that, but I do think it's important that we provide the rationale for adopting the 1 meter distancing requirement. I hope that helps, Trustee Edwards.
Okay, Trustee Crawford.
Well, again, along with what Patrice was saying, I need to know what the effect of this is. We adopt this, but what happens to the class size part of it? What happens to the costing of it? And I think we didn't get a full answer on that. And I would like staff to say what would be the effect of adopting this money-wise and class size-wise.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to answer that from staff?
Through you, Chair. Currently, we don't have the numbers as to how many students are in the virtual school. So until we do that reorganization and restaffing, it's difficult for us to predict what this will look like. What we do know is that based on our numbers prior to opening up DDSB at home, that there were a significant number of our classes that we believed would have been oversubscribed based on the 1 meter distancing. We do need to wait until families make up their mind today in terms of how many students won't be attending in person and then do that analysis. So I know it's frustrating not to have the factual information, but we just don't know yet. We know that the virtual school is growing, and as it grows, that does then create more opportunities to find some spacing potentially. However, we also know we have to reassign teachers to the virtual school. And so it doesn't completely solve the class size max issue. It will depend on how many teachers that we currently have within our current complement that we could assign in addition to the physical buildings. Previously, it had been mentioned about the centralized staff. That is part of our planning as an example. So in terms of meeting that 1 meter of distancing, on Monday, we are looking at centralized staff, recognizing that there aren't that many. You may recall that we did a significant number of reductions in centralized staff for budget purposes this year. Currently, we have approximately 40 elementary teachers assigned centrally. However, many of them are attached to specific funding for that purpose. For example, we have 22 ESL coaches. So there's not as much flexibility centrally as one might think, given the cuts that we've already made to provide a balanced budget. So until we get the virtual numbers, do the reorg, it's very difficult for us to predict what the cost will be. What we do know is that currently the cost will be phenomenal and far beyond the budget that the board has access to if the virtual school did not exist. I'm happy to take any further follow-up questions, recognizing that I haven't really answered the question, but trying to explain the process as to why we don't have the numbers right now.
Well, if I could do a follow-up on that, if it was to end at this time and we had to make a decision at this time with the information that you have, what would be the cost and what would be the effect on class size? Or if you want to, give us some idea, because we are in effect directing you to go with the 1 meter without finding out what the cost is or what you need to do to achieve that?
So through you, Chair, in the current scenario, we have approximately, we would be looking at, without the virtual school, we would be looking at potentially 660 teachers potentially, which is a real ballpark because it's based on a number of scenarios. With the virtual school in place, when we were looking at this motion coming forward, it would potentially provide approximately 90 teachers. I'm not sure at this point whether or not that will be more than enough, and we wouldn't need all of those positions to achieve the 1 meter distancing. It's also, the other complexity of this is we need to understand that there's a spacing situation. So if we have some schools where there's a high subscription to the virtual school, we will have more classrooms, and potentially then it's an easy, a simpler addition in terms of staffing. If it's a school, however, that is highly subscribed and we're seeing that not a lot of students have chosen for the virtual environment, then we also have a physical constraint, and then we have less staffing because we would then be looking into the expense of portables. So it's very difficult to give exact numbers until we know exactly where students are landing in terms of their choice for September.
Okay, Trustee Forbes.
Thank you. I just also want to acknowledge that this motion in front of us, as well as the other motions that we will be addressing, are also going to inform our parents and our families, our guardians of our students' decisions, whether to opt for in-class learning or virtual learning. So this could have a material impact on what people decide. And I realize that this is the last day that they have to decide, but there is an ability for them to change a previous decision in the tool. So I just want us to also be mindful of that.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. Go ahead, Trustee Morgan.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you, Nora, for those comments. I'd like to ask a question, though, based on the information you have provided us. At the present time, what percentage of our students have sought to be online virtual school?
Thank you. So we have, I think we're at approximately 13%. And I am going to ask Associate Director Kisco, do you have the chart in front of you as far as we wanted to get updated numbers for today? Do you have that, Associate Director Kisco?
I will, it'll take me a minute just to pull it up. I'm sorry. I don't have it right in front of me, but it is sent to us each morning at 8 o'clock. I will try to find it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I do have it. So today we're at 11,300, and the secondary is at 2,483. Elementary is at 8,860.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
So Trustee Forbes and Trustee Barnes.
I just have a concern that if we don't adopt a measure like this, there could be an equity issue in terms of socioeconomics, in terms of differences in families' abilities to opt for distance learning versus families who may need to go and leave the home for work, may need to have not have access to in-home care. And that this could be, if we're not able to, in schools that may have higher density of children who have had to opt for in-class learning, due to family circumstances. If we're not able to provide that 1 meter distancing versus a different school where due to family circumstances, more students have been able to opt for distance learning, that from an equity and standpoint concerns me quite a bit. So I would be in favor of this motion.
Thank you. Trustee Burns, Crawford, then Barrett.
Thank you. I also have a concern similar to Trustee Forbes, but I have a concern in regards to approving this without the proper numbers and details. Because if we're approving this and we don't know, we will potentially cause equity issues in that we will have to decide on schools where we're going to put this money. Do we have enough to implement all the that needs to be implemented? I'm really concerned because we don't have enough information in regards to this. The spirit of the motion I support. I think kids should be distanced at least 1 meter apart. I think we should do everything to make sure that our students and staff are safe. I just would like more information in regards to what is that going to look like? Are we going to have enough money only for 10 schools to be distanced outside of what needs to be distanced? Those are my concerns. I really want to know enough so we can make a proper decision for the best of our students. Do we have the money? We're saying, okay, but in essence, we're talking to the motion, and I really support the 1 meter. I just don't know if we have enough information to make all the decisions that we need to make.
Okay, Trustee Crawford, Barrett, then Noble.
My concerns are the same. I think we need to break this down to specifics. For instance, we know that we have $8 million in reserve. Are we telling staff here to spend the $8 million or to spend more? We also know that class size is set in elementary at a given class size. Are we instructing staff here to reduce that class size? Because one of the important things is the class size is a negotiated number. We don't even know whether we can change that class size. We know we can't change it upwards, but can we change it downwards? So I think we need to break this section down that gives more specific instructions to staff. And I would like staff to comment on the two things I mentioned, the $8 million and the changing the size of the class relative to the 1 meter.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Brainy. We are not able to, we are limited as far as the upward end of class sizes. It is at the board's discretion in terms of when we do our organization of schools. Some classes are smaller than other classes, and that is not a collective agreement issue. Always we attempt to be fair and distribute staff appropriately amongst the various needs that we have throughout the district. The 8 million would, again, it would fund approximately 90 elementary teachers. However, I do want to flag that that would be dependent on, is there space to set up that classroom? Because if there isn't space for the classroom, depending on what we find when we do our analysis, then we would need to also have the cost of creating, getting portables on site. So as soon as we have our virtual numbers, that is the first job that staff are doing in terms of looking at specifically, because we also know our classroom configurations are different in terms of size. So while we've done rough calculations to estimate how many tables or desks can fit in per square feet and achieve the 1 meter distancing, we know, for example, in some classrooms, teachers have or the school has attached large bookcases and whatnot, that may mean that some classes contain a smaller number of students than other classes who have the same square footage in the blueprint, but because there's fixtures now to the wall, it limits the space for classroom desks and tables. So again, it would be a class-by-class school analysis that we would be doing over the course of next week once we have the virtual numbers.
Mr. Chair, may I have two supplementaries?
Go ahead.
Number one thing is that this funding is for the full year. So if we were to add 90 teachers, for instance, we are committing that for the full year, or would it change as the threat of COVID went down?
Through you, Chair, we wouldn't be hiring permanent teachers. We would be hiring long-term occasional teachers for the positions.
So they would go down as the threat went down?
If the direction was to do a reorg, we would have to, always thinking in terms of the collective agreement as well, we would have to look then at how we could, if the scenario changed, put students back into other classrooms, and the LTO teacher would no longer be required.
Okay, and here's the most difficult question. What is the threat ratio at this time? If we were to open today, what is the threat ratio?
For sure. And through you, Chair Brainy, if you don't mind, I'm going to say one more thing about the LTOs and the year that I just thought of. And that is one of the things whenever we do any major reorg where teachers change for students, that is something that families are always highly concerned about. So I just want to be transparent in terms of the flexibility we have. Partially, it would be collective agreement. And then part of the consideration, of course, would be the nature of the class and stability for students. So just wanted to articulate that as well. In terms of your question, Trustee Crawford, you did ask that at our previous meeting, and I had indicated then that I wasn't comfortable necessarily weighing in because it was more of a medical question. We did, as I committed, reach out to Durham Region Health Department and ask them in terms of that question being posed. And so I'll play the role as messenger from them, but this is certainly not DDSB's opinion. It is what they have told us. They have suggested that in the last 3 to 4 weeks, we've had 5 or less cases new cases on a daily basis. And therefore, in a population of 600,000, they deem the probability as low as far as spread. So that is their opinion to us, not DDSB's opinion.
You have Trustee Barrett, Noble, Lundquist, and Barnes.
Thank you, Chair Brainy. And I think that fundamentally, we have no choice but to be able to ensure that we do everything we possibly can do to be able to have 1 meter between our students. And I think that that's the intent of the motion. To me, it's non-debatable in the sense that we have to do that. You know, for some, this is a theoretical exercise. For others, we've been living this since February the 28th and having to reorganize workplaces, facilities and offices and stuff. So all these things that we're talking about are all practical and realistic elements that we have to discuss. So I think that from the standpoint of the motion, we have to do everything that we need to be able to do. I too do a great deal of reading with regards to what's happening in other jurisdictions, and I'm looking at the province of Quebec, which went from 2 meters down to 1 meter, and had hard caps on class sizes, have gone away from hard caps on class sizes. The magic number is not 15. The magic number, there's not a magic class size. The magic class size here is that 100-meter distancing. 100 meters, sorry, that would be a problem. 1 meter distance, I can't even run 100 meters. That's another story. But the 1 meter distancing becomes the critical component. And as already indicated by the director, each classroom is going to be different. There's going to be some classrooms that can easily fit 22, and there's some that are only going to fit 10. And that's the flexibility that we need, and I believe that it's built in. The only concern I would have is the blank check mentality with regards to a hard and fast that says 1 meter. Because if we did not have the 8,860 students opting for virtual learning, this is just not affordable. It's just impossible when I'm using your numbers, Nora, 660 teachers. That's just not possible. We're even talking about 90 teachers. I've done some calculations. I think our 8.1 million only hires us 75 teachers. And again, I don't have all the numbers, so I'll leave it to others. We are being asked to be able to give a blank check, and I'm uncomfortable with that. But the comment, though, the concept that we must do everything we can to be able to ensure the 1 meter distancing is a critical component of this motion, and so therefore needs to be supported. But the other piece, when it comes to the dollars, I believe comes in section 3, the next item, which is about spending the reserves, because it can't be a blank check. And I'll talk more about the clause 3 when we get to clause 3. But to me, the fundamental, we have to support the 1 meter. All science says we have to support the 1 meter.
Ashley Noble and Trustee Noble and Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you, Chair Brainy. I believe that since day one, back in March, would have been March 13th, that the province announced we were shutting down, that social distancing has been in place in public spaces such as mall outlets and other public venues. It is 2 meters. I do want to draw attention to the public letter that was sent to us, the Board of Trustees, from the President of ETBO and DECE on Monday, stating that they are kindly requesting that we do use our reserve funds to ensure that we can have smaller class sizes to ensure that social distancing can occur. In that letter, which I say is public because it has been posted all over social media, so it is public, they are requesting 2 meters, up to at least 2 meters, and we are saying 1 meter here, which is a very bare minimum that we can do at this point. I personally believe that if we don't pass this part of the motion, that we are putting ourselves in place for a massive health and safety risk, as COVID can spread, and all it takes is one person to contract COVID, and if they are not social distancing in at least one aspect, then we could have more issues, given the fact that currently the ministry has said that students who are in kindergarten to grade 3 do not have to wear masks. If they are not wearing masks and are also not at least a meter apart, we are still putting ourselves at a massive risk. I personally, and this might not be a popular opinion amongst the other trustees and colleagues I have, but I do not believe that there's a dollar amount that we can put that is worth the lives of our staff and students. So I'm okay spending 8.1 million from our reserves to do whatever we need to do to ensure the safety. And I'm okay if it's more, because there's not a dollar amount that can equate to a life that we have in our system.
Okay, I'm going to go to Trustee Lundquist, Edwards, and Morton. Then we're going to go to a vote. Everybody's had a chance to speak here, so we'll end it at that. So Trustee Lundquist, Edwards, and Morton. Go ahead, Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you. So I've looked at the motion again, and I do want to say I think that A kind of sets the vision of what we want to do, and B is actually about implementing it. So, I mean, that's how I see it. I don't see it as problematic in any respect. So I just wanted to clarify that for Trustee Edwards. I appreciate Trustee Barnes' concern and Trustee Barrett's too, right? We don't know, and Crawford's, we don't know what this expenditure looks like at this stage. But this isn't a blank check. This is actually a very specific goal. And the goal is to implement social distancing. And if we do not have the capacity to do that with the money that we have allotted, then the goal is advocacy. Advocacy to the government to provide the supports it should have provided in the first place. And I just want to make an observation about the threat ratio. So I'm just going to say this: we are in the midst of a pandemic with a novel virus. There are so many unknowns. The precautionary principle says in the face of that, you emphasize caution. And a plan that doesn't actually engage social distancing is not cautious enough. It is absolutely a failure. So to me, If we don't pass something that includes that minimum of 1 meter, then we have failed the students of this board. We have failed the parents, and we have failed our communities, because it will not be contained in a school if there is an outbreak. And so it's not as simple as saying there's low risk, right? There's low risk for a lot of things, and that doesn't mean that you don't take every reasonable step that you can to put in appropriate mitigation measures, recognizing that there are limitations. We do not have enough reserve funding to do what I think we should be doing. But that's a separate question. That's number 3. So the very idea that the goal is to socially or physically distance people, teachers and students, to keep them safe, to me, it's a non-starter. It is something that is vital to any return to school plan, and I can't urge you more clearly than that, I don't think, to support this part of the motion. It's essential for children's safety, in my view. Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Edwards and Morton, then we're going to go to a vote. Once again, we'll do a roll call, and I will then turn it over to Kim Cox. She can do the roll call on that. So Trustee Edwards, then Morton, then we're going to a vote. Go ahead, Trustee Edwards.
Thank you, Chair Brainy. I agree with the principle that we have to try to meet the needs, and at this point in time, the way I'm reading that particular motion, and I'm reading with the first part of the sentence of the motion that says that the DDSB will adopt the plan for virtual learning and for elementary students and adjust its plan for students elected to return to intern learning. And then we go to ensure all classes. The problem, the thing is, we can't ensure unless we can actually put the dollars in there. And that's where I'm looking about. But I definitely agree that the premise of the plan is that is really important to state, as you say, Trustee Lindquist, is to actually say that that plan is based on meeting a minimum of 1 meter distance, because then later on we deal with the masks too, but the 1 meter distance. So it's the premise of the sick kids, and I think that maybe if we can just put it's the premise of the sick kids that the plan will be modified as best as we can possibly can to meet that 1 distance. We don't mention anything about pricing, because that's the next part of the the policy, the costs and so forth. So and the thing is, I think it's the principle of the 1 meter. So we're adopting the plan for the principle of the 1 meter. I think what some people may argue, and I'm not saying it's necessary in this group, but the ensuring part for some people connect, because that means we absolutely have to do it's the wording of that, but we definitely want the principle of the 1 meter. Anyways, but that's just my comment. I agree with it that we should do the best we can. The next part to me is where we're going to be dealing with the funding.
Okay, last speaker, Trustee Morton, then I'm calling a vote on this. Go ahead, Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Brainy. This is a question for our director. I'm just wondering, when we're talking about the 1 meter spacing, which everyone is in agreement, we need to have that. Have we had a conversation with the Durham Catholic School Board? If they have unused classrooms in their facilities, could we conversation in order to use some of those spaces?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Trustee Morton, we have not entered into any conversations with any other party in terms of access to their space. Once we do our analysis and under board's direction, we could certainly look to see what's possible in terms of other spaces. There's always, whenever we shift a class of students, of course, there are new risks that you encounter while solving other risks. And there's also, in terms of our collective agreement requirements around placement of teachers, so those would be, and educators. So those would be all things that we would have to factor into any accessing of third-party spaces, should we require it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're going to go to a vote and do a roll call on this section. I'll ask Kim Cox if she could do the roll call and record that.
Okay, trustees, it's a recorded vote on clause 2 as amended, and I'll proceed alphabetically. Trustee Barnes?
I support.
Trustee Barrett?
In favor.
Trustee Crawford?
There, Trustee Crawford.
Sorry, I abstain.
Trustee Edwards?
In favor.
Trustee Forbes?
In favor.
Trustee Lundquist?
In favor.
Trustee Morton?
In favor.
Trustee Noble?
In favor.
Trustee Templeton?
In favor.
Trustee Thatcher?
I'm in favor.
You didn't ask me, but I am also.
Okay,
Thank you. That carries.
yes, 10 in favor.
Thank you. So then we move on to the next section. Trustee Forbes? You're on me. You're on.
This is the catchphrase for 2020 is you're on mute. Okay. Section 3, the DDSB authorizes the board to use reserve funds of up to 1% of the board's 2020 budget to facilitate the adoption of mitigation measures to keep students and staff as safe as possible.
It's a nice pause. Thank you. Do we have speakers to that? Trustee Crawford, Forbes, Templeton, and Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to amend that and take out as well and just keep it, keep students and staff safe.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that? I see none. Okay, we'll move on then to Trustee Forbes. Is your hand up? Okay, yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I am in favor of this. I understand that the 1% of the board's budget from the reserves is related to the ministry's memorandum about boards not being able to access additional funding from the ministry until we have spent 1% of our budget from our reserves, if indeed we have it. So we do have it. I don't want to, honestly. I want to keep the reserves. I would like the government to step up and fund all COVID-related expenses, which if it is social distancing to ensure staff and student safety, then this is what they should be doing. But I have no control over that. So I feel that we have adopted the previous motions. And now, yes, this is the hard part because we have to pay for them. And we know that this money supports excellent programs that are chronically underfunded, particularly in the area of special education. And we know that this is one-time funding and this we can't replace in a very short time. So this is a huge decision. This is very impactful for the long term of our board. I recognize that. So please know that my support of this motion factors that in. but I feel that the safety of students and staff, and by extension, our community, families at home, grandparents, extended families, that we need to do everything we can to keep them safe. So I am personally in favor of this motion.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. So I have Trustee Templeton, Barrett, Morton, Noble, Edwards, and Crawford again. Go ahead.
I was gonna echo a lot of what Darlene just finished saying. The only thing that I'm in favor of the motion completely, because you can't put a price on children's safety, and whatever it takes to keep them safe is what we need to do. I understand the special ed, because we do need the money from the reserves for topping that up and keeping that along. But I always go back to something that my father said to me. Always, always reserved for a rainy day, and I believe that's what we're doing right now. This is a rainy day. This is unprecedented times, and we need to put that money to keep our children safe. So I am in favor of this part of the motion, and thank you, Darlene, for echoing everything I was going to say.
Trustee Barrett.
Chair Brady, I have a couple questions, if I could, of staff. Assuming we spend the entire $8.1 million, I've used the number of 75 teachers, but that's only a number that was calculated. I'd like to truly understand what that actually might deliver us in the sense of staff. And I understand that it's not going to be a perfect science either, Nora, in the sense that if you have EAs and ECEs, et cetera, there are different elements to that. So.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So the difference in our numbers, I think, probably is our calculation around years of experience. And so an assumption in my calculation, just to be transparent, given the available teaching pools, was that there would not be many years of experience. So there is a range between a first year LTO and a more experienced LTO. So that may explain some of the differences in the calculation. So again, depending on the nature of how it breaks down by community, it could be that we actually have to set up new spaces that would require then new resources potentially in terms of student access to materials, setting up the teacher or the educators involved in that classroom in terms of the technology that they accessed in order to do their job. So when we are looking at this amount, we're looking at the high end of approximately 90 teachers, should everything else, so if it's just straight teaching staff as an example, there may be situations, as you've indicated, where we might have an EA in one class supporting a group of students, but once we create more classes and those students are separated, there are then two groups, and then there would be the requirement of an EA as an example. In the kindergarten space, we know that there's often very specialized play type access, and so there again, there may be some funding put towards the facility. But having said all of that, if we have less students in the room, there is, I think, a lot of potential of shifting material over. We also have discussed that in some communities where we're seeing high subscription to virtual learning, we could actually move materials from that school physically that aren't being used in terms of redeployment virtually to help equip schools where we're setting up new classroom spaces. So the number of teachers will vary depending on the context of the school. As soon as we start getting into portables, then we're into obviously a much greater expense in terms of the setup. And of course, there's a delay then because it normally takes about 7 weeks, 8 weeks to get a portable on site and ready to go. So I don't know if that's specific enough for you, Trustee Barrett, but that is the thinking that we have in relation to it.
As close enough as my numbers are, so that's okay. Supplementary, I have a couple supplementaries, Chair Brainy. The next one was just with regards, I'm assuming that the hiring of additional staff or resources would be secondary to adjusting the staffing models to the virtual learning that you had alluded to. So in the sense that, you know, if you do have classes that are smaller because of the virtual learning, depending upon, are we going to leave classes of like 10 when other classes may have 20, or is our first target to be able to adjust the resourcing with current allocations as opposed to just hiring?
For sure. So our order of operations in terms of once we have the numbers, we've said that the virtual school does provide us an opportunity to be really effective in the use of allocation of staff. And so our commitment, and we have talked with the Federation about our commitment, is the physical distancing within the school setting. So what we anticipate, we have to respect collective agreements in terms of class size averages within the virtual school. But because it's such a large number of students that we're programming for, we expect then the larger the school, the more effectively you can allocate staff in a manner that actually generates potentially a pool of teachers that aren't assigned to the virtual school because they were assigned in local schools where the class size just didn't divide well. So for example, sometimes if you have a class of 35, you're dividing that in two. But it's unlikely in the virtual school, because of the efficiency of the denominator, that you're going to have as many of those scenarios of small classes as a remainder almost, right, when we do our staffing process. So our commitment is to use that pool of teachers and educators to then reassign to in-person schools to try to keep the cohorts as small as possible in terms of the 1 meter distancing. Our second layer then would be, we've already talked about looking at centrally appointed staff. We've recognized, though, a number of those positions, as I've previously indicated, there's direct funding for that central position. We also recognize that there's a new elementary math curriculum, and there's a commitment to anti-Black racism and anti-oppression training this year. So recognizing those components, every lead, though, every superintendent has been asked to determine who could return back, be reallocated and return back to a school for this year, because it's such an unusual circumstance, understanding that we have those other commitments. So that would be our second wave. And then at that point, our plan had been look at what where we sit in terms of the staffing and the numbers in every classroom. And then from there, we would know what our needs are. Our first move, of course, is to a bigger space within the site if that's available. So that would also factor into our thinking prior to doing the hiring process.
So is the government, Nora, through you, Mr. Chair, is the government going to force us to be able to work towards the class averages, et cetera? So is there a threat there that because we have individuals in virtual learning, are we creating a self-fulfilling prophecy here by reducing class sizes and then the ministry forcing us to be able to work to the class averages?
So through you, Chair, I think there's a couple of parts here. So one is the memo that they put out around their additional funding for educators. And I mentioned this to the trustees previously at the previous meeting. It does say that they're expecting boards to use up to 1% of their operating costs to address situations in schools. And then it says, once you've done that, you can apply for and request additional funding from the Government of Ontario to address class size average pressures. We've asked for clarification on what that means. We have not received an answer yet, but to us, there seems to be, we're not clear on how we could have class size average pressures if we've used 1% of our operating budget to hire more teachers. There won't be class size average pressures, but there may still be classrooms where students aren't achieving 1 meter apart. And that would be a pressure for us, but they didn't define it that way. And we have asked for clarification and it's pending. So that's one part of the answer. And I forget, Trustee Barrett, you had there's another part to your question that I haven't addressed.
No, You've answered what I needed to know on that, Nora. And I just have one more question, Chris, if I could, and then a quick soapbox. So what happens in a classroom, let's say JK and SK, where physical distancing requires the class to be split into two, for argument's sake? So let's say you can only have 15. You're now under that threshold of 15 where an ECE is no longer required in the classroom. What is the modeling going to look like if indeed some of our classrooms only allow 15 because of the 1 meter? What happens to these ECEs? What happens to that modeling?
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that when we're creating new kindergarten classes, if we're creating new kindergarten classes, it would not entail the hiring of new ECEs, because we anticipate that we would potentially be under the threshold where we would require an additional ECE. However, what we will do with our ECEs, first of all, virtually, we have a huge number of junior and senior kindergarten families signing up. Our ECEs are going to play a critical role in terms of the virtual DDSB at home. They play a critical role in the education of our students. So we're looking at doing really helping them facilitate that enriching, rigorous opportunity for our earliest learners. So that they will be part of that shift for staffing. And then in other instances with ECEs, we would then be looking at those classrooms where we think it's really beneficial, or it still exceeds the threshold, but with 1 meter apart between students, they would still be assigned there. And then also assigned to classes, we would do divide the classes up as we always do, considering the developmental needs of particular students, and try to get additional assistance in those rooms where we think that the needs are such that the students would really benefit from the expertise of the ECs within the setting.
Okay, thank you. And I'll close off and thank you for your indulgence, Chair Brainy. It's just that, I have difficulty spending the reserves. I have difficulty in being able to come to this decision. Primarily probably for a different reason. It's not about the desire to want to hold the funds. It's not about the equity issues. It's about, we are letting this government off the hook. We are allowing this government to determine, because whether it's the fiscal prudence of certain boards, to be able to utilize those reserves. Now, I've certainly gotten a few emails. There's a big misnomer about the reserves. $14 million in an $800 million budget is not a huge reserve. There is, I believe, a misconception, and I think we've helped to be able to get to that point. But the biggest problem I have with this, and I'm not saying whether or not I'm going to support it or not, because I'm fundamentally supportive of ensuring the safety and well-being of our students and staff, is what I see this as. We are letting this government off the hook. This government has not had a realistic approach to the educational piece in a COVID environment since it started in March. We are allowing them to be able to determine that, yes, you can use the funding instead of having a philosophical, fundamental approach to this COVID in education. So that's my biggest concern. We are playing right into the hands of the government to be able to say, trustees, boards, staff, go fix it. When it needs to have a consolidated approach from Queen's Park to say, this is our critical component. This is what we need to be able to fund it. It's not about having school boards be able to determine where they can dig up dollars in order to be able to do this. I think it's shameful of the government. I think it is absolutely incorrect, forcing the responsibility onto school boards. That being said, I don't believe there's anybody around this table, but there are many school boards in this province that have zero reserves. I would say 40 out of the 61 school boards have no reserves. So where are those school boards going to get the dollars? We're fortunate, we have dollars. But if this COVID lasts this whole year and we roll into next year, we will not have enough dollars to be able to continue this. And if, let's say half of those students come back, Nora, from the virtual in January, we are not going to be able to afford this. And I don't want it to be. I'm not going to be drawn into the thing about, there's not a dollar, that we can't spend. I get that. That's a philosophical, who can argue with that emotional piece? But the reality is we don't have deficit funding opportunities as a school board. So, I mean, that's my biggest concern. I believe this is just giving the government what they want, allowing us to be able to solve the issues through fiscal prudence, and the government and the minister and the premier just roll on into this and not understand that we're not protecting the resource that we need to protect the most. And I promise to shut up now, Chris.
Thanks. Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Brainy. Firstly, I would like to thank our director for answering my first question, and that was in regards to the centrally appointed staff. You've inadvertently answered that question. And my second question was very similar to what Trustee Barrett has posed. We need to know that that $8.1 million will be deployed in certain areas. I want to know how that money will affect our families. Are our priorities kindergarten, junior, intermediate, secondary? Could you give us any kind of an idea as to how that $8.1 million would be spent? Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Chair Brainy. Trustee Morton, we would, right now our focus is the 1 meter distancing, and currently at elementary is the pressure point. So we would be looking again class by class to see configuration wise how many desks or tables we're able to fit in with the 1 meter achieved, and then where we have class sizes over that amount, that is where we would then run through our process of looking for a larger space in the school, looking to see if we could reassign a teacher centrally, looking to see if there's that pool that's left from the virtual staffing, and move our way through the process. It's difficult to say right now what area in elementary would be the focus point, because it's really going to depend on the school and how the class sizes work out based on enrollment. So we'll have more information in relation to that. And again, that's one of the reasons why we've asked for our families to sign up by the end of day today, so that we have that opportunity that that week of August 24th, then we start problem solving in terms of where have we not achieved that and what are we doing about it. That was the original plan, and I would say that it would still be the plan, except now the difference would be we would move into staffing and using, if the motion were passed, we would then look at that as the last resort pending those other pieces.
Thank you. Just one other thing I want to, and I know that you are cognizant of the differences between a kindergarten classroom distancing requirements will be very different as well. And I know that you are cognizant of those needs. Thank you.
Okay, so we have 4 speakers left, and I'm going to go to the vote. We've got Trustee Noble, Edwards, Crawford, Barnes, and I'll let Trustee Lundquist have the last word. Go ahead, Trustee Noble.
Thank you. There's a lot that I have to say about this, but I'll limit it because I know I did speak about this earlier. I do believe that using our reserve funds does help better ensure the safety and safety practices for all of our staff and students. I do believe that we should be standing up to the government and demanding more funds from the government for this, but it is very apparent that they are not going to give us the funding right now. And I don't believe the pandemic is the time to take that stand and say, you better fund us, because we're not funding it. I'm very concerned with that. The government didn't give us funding last year when collective bargaining was happening, and I don't believe they're going to give us more funding now, truthfully. I do believe that as trustees, since we are elected by the public, we should be listening to what the public and our constituents have to say. And it is very clear that the public and all of our constituents and staff are advocating for smaller class sizes by using the funds that we have in our reserve. And I understand that the reserve funds were not something that we suddenly magically came across, and it took years of saving, but we also have never experienced a pandemic like this since 1918, and no one could have prepared for this. And there is no amount of money in the world that could properly ensure that all of our schools and school boards and all of the province and country are going to be perfectly equipped to handle what could be happening in the next few months. So I do believe that it is in our best interest as trustees and as a school board to ensure the safety of our staff and students, families, and communities by using the reserve funds, while simultaneously asking for more money from the government, which we are talking about later on in the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. First, I just, a lot of my questions were answered from the previous trustees, and thank you for that. What I want to do is address some of the misconceptions out there and what we haven't addressed as well. I have no problem spending reserves, but I cannot say that we can spend the reserves specifically for one particular item, in that we have to address the needs of the students, all their needs, their mental health needs. We already know that, and we already know the funding isn't there. The misconceptions out there, based on the emails I've received, is that this $8.1 million will allow us to achieve a 2-meter distance in the classrooms. It will not. We've already been said, I had used rough calculations for the number of teachers to the dollars amounts in our budget, and I had 75.5, it came up, and I had recognized the points that Acting Director Nora Marsh had said, that it's probably, more than that. But that's only the classroom. We also have the issue right now at busing, where we have our kids on the bus that are not even a meter apart. Yes, they will have to wear masks, but then they will go into the classroom and mix. And I know cohorting is going to be as much, but I just can't see it happening. But we have the mental health needs. So what I have no problem addressing doing reserves, but at this point in time, I don't know what the impact until we get the numbers in and where we want to spend it. So as I said, in principle, I have no problems doing reserves, and I recognize, that as far as the government is concerned, they need to step up. But I do have a problem of saying right now that we're going to spend this, and people are all talking about class sizes, and we have other important issues for our students to return to safety. And I've got, it was interesting after that board meeting on Monday, how many emails I got from parents who said, especially around the busing issue, who said, I have no choice because I don't have a car. I have to get to work. I have to put my kid in school. So at this point, I have no problem with reserves, but I need a plan. And I need an informative plan on what we are doing, because we are responsible and fiscally responsible for using that money wisely and appropriately. And I just cannot say that we're going to put a check that and people coming out of this meeting saying that they're going to get, thinking that they're going to get that 2-meter distance in the school, and then and they're not, because we know it's not going to meet those needs. So I need a better plan, and I cannot look at that until we get better numbers. And Acting Director Marsh has said that she doesn't even know what that impact is going to be. So that's where, again, I have no problem using reserves, but what's the plan to use them for? It's always come back to the board, and that's our responsibility as a board. And that's based on what I'm hearing from parents as well. I don't know how many parents have said also that now that they know that what the busing situation is like, they are not going to put their kid in class, or they're going to drive their child to school. But those are the children, the parents who can afford to have a car. And then I've also heard around resources. Our teachers, and I have several, believe it or not, I have friends that are teachers and EAs and so forth, and those teachers spend much money on additional resources for the classrooms, but and a lot of times they're shared. But now they can't do that because of the health concerns. So can we ensure that we have the resources in the classrooms to support the students' learning? So I have a lot of questions around there. And as I said, I have no problem, but I can't do it unless responsibly until we see a plan, because I am listening, and I know everybody here has been listening and so forth, but I really need a better plan in order to say that this is what we're spending on, because I'm not necessarily sure it's going to be just on classroom sizes. And we've already said, we can't do that. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Trustee Crawford.
Thank you. I'm not going to go into what the government says, and I think everything that people have said up to now makes sense. The first thing we have to do is give staff permission to use that money. By the way, is it 8 or is it 14? Are we talking about $8 million or $14 million?
It's 1% of the board's reserves as the motion is read. I'm sorry to jump in. I hope that's okay. Which I believe equates to 8.1 million.
Okay, thank you. And I agree with Donna. We have to know where that money is going to go and also the effect of it. We have to understand that safety-wise, it's probably going to reduce the ratio. Whatever it is, we have to go along with it politically. And I trust staff will use this money, because I think the other part of the motion says to make students and staff safe as possible. So it's got to be directed towards that. My immediate question came because we've received this question so often is, if we spend $8 million, what will the class size be? And I don't know if we have speculation on that. But anyway, as far as I'm concerned, this is something that we must do. I'm in favor of it. And another thing that's very important to what the director said is that if we don't do this, we can't go back to the government and ask for more money. It sounds like it's a prerequisite for asking for more money. So I hate to not do this, and then when we go back to them, they tell us, so you didn't fulfill that. So it's the least we can do.
Okay, thanks, Trustee. So I'm going to go to Trustee Barnes. I was going to stop at Trustee Lundquist, but because Trustee Thatcher hasn't had a chance to speak to this yet, I'm going to go to Trustee Barnes, then Trustee Thatcher, then I'm going to have Trustee Lundquist finalize. So I've got 3 more speakers, and we're going to a vote on this. So Trustee Barnes.
Thank you. I have a question for Director Marsh. How late is it before if we need to do staffing, what's the deadline for hiring staff?
So it's a good question in terms of to be ready for school reopening. Our goal on August 25th was to have the reorg done and to analyze where we have challenges. And at that point in our plan, you may recall, we said that we would report back to the board in terms of where we felt we had challenges. That we felt did leave us adequate time potentially to, the thing is, and I think a few trustees have alluded to this previously, every board is going through this process and every board is anticipating potentially staff shortages, even from the point of view of potential leaves. So the question will be available staff and available qualified staff. French immersion obviously is one of those areas that we know there's a shortage of teachers. So it will depend on the subject area, the qualification, and then the opportunity to actually hire. We have flagged for our human resources department to already start advertising for additional occasional teachers, with the notion that we were going to be doing hubs of OT so that they weren't going to all schools across the district. So that process is already in place. but the LTO hiring would be a separate process. I do know that there are other boards potentially who are looking to hire as well. And so it would really depend on having sufficient qualified applicants ready to appoint. I am sincere in that I think the timing that we have tried to indicate through this process, one of the reasons why we got the communication out on July 31st to our families was that notion of trying to be prepared or being prepared for the return to school. It will depend on the volume of educators that we need based on the virtual enrollment. So everything does go back to getting those numbers solidly in place for DDSB at home.
Thank you. And in support of what Trustee Donna said, I don't have a problem supporting using the reserve. I do have a problem because we don't have a plan, and so we're assuming right now that teachers will be the most important piece of that plan, or staffing will be the most important piece of that plan. But I wouldn't be objected to that motion being adjusted, where we come back, or staff come back to trustees with a plan of how that money is going to be spent and how much of that money is going to be spent. And I know the 1% is what is dictated by the ministry, but do we have that funds? Are those funds not allocated? I think we did mention that, but I wasn't sure as yet.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Brainy, Trustee Barnes, you are correct. So the Ministry of Education has not committed any specific funding to our board in addition for the hiring of educators. What they have said is there's a provincial pot of money that boards could apply for. However, we're unclear about the criteria attached to that application as to whether or not we would qualify. We know that they've directed that it would be 1% of the operating out of reserves, but what we aren't clear on is their language around the class size average, and we've sought clarification, but have not received it.
And for that 1%, is that unallocated funds that we have available?
No, the 1% was the operating budget.
So Trustee Barnes, did you just say you're putting through an amended motion at this stage?
I wanted everybody else to have their, whether you have a speakers list, but I would like to look at that after all the speakers have gone through.
Okay, I have Trustee Thatcher, then Trustee Lundquist. Then we were going to go to a vote on that, but you're throwing an amendment in. So let me go through these two, and we'll get to that then. Then we'll just spin the wheels again, keep spinning. So go ahead, Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Brainy. There's no doubt I support many of the points that have been made here today by trustees. I know that's, I voted in favor of all of the parts so far of this motion. And I know that's the right thing to do because like all of us, I think, I've heard from many parents, and I have a very clear understanding of what their concerns are and what their fears are. Safety and well-being of our students and our staff is of utmost concern to me. I've lived it, and I've shown this and demonstrated this for many years. That is definitely a given. So with this in mind, we have spent money from our reserve in the past. We've spent this money to support our most vulnerable students, our special needs students. And if we need it to support our students in the future, I believe we'll do it again. So there's no doubt in my mind that if it's needed, let's do it. But just hearing from Acting Director Marsh today, we haven't got all of the information in. We know that many parents are listening today and will make their decisions based on what they need, and they need our assurances that we're hearing them and acting upon their concerns and their fears. We need to have our virtual numbers in. We need to do a reorg, and then we need to identify what our specific needs are. I'd like to think that spending this $8.1 million will solve all of our problems, but I really am not sure that it will, because I really need to have a plan. I need to have more information. I want to let the government know what our parents, what our families are feeling, what their concerns are, and where we feel they've fallen down, and how they need to help us to make this right for our families. So I don't have any problem using reserves. I'm not sure if 75 teachers will solve all of our problems. I think we just need to be responsible and determine what our needs are. And when we have the final numbers in, and we can look at our data, and then come to some decision about what our needs are, then I think we need to look at what we need to do to solve those needs as best we can. So thank you very much, Chair Brainy, for letting me jump in there. I appreciate it.
No problem. Trustee Lundquist.
Thank you. I think I'm going to have a fair amount to say, so I'm going to do my best to keep it brief. I agree with everything that Trustee Barrett said. This lands on the government. This is the government's responsibility. They have handed us an unworkable plan that doesn't protect safety. That is my view of it. They have abdicated their responsibilities, and we are being asked to do something that very few boards are able to actually do. But we are able to do it, and it is because of fiscal prudence of previous boards, and I actually appreciate that those funds are there and the length of time it takes to accumulate them. Leche referred to them as rainy day funds. It is raining. It's not raining, it's a torrential downpour. We're talking about sending children back into environments where we have significant gaps in terms of making sure we meet minimum standards that have been recommended by every expert. That's the lowest possible standard, by the way. We're not reaching for stars here. We're reaching for something very basic. And I recognize that the $8.1 million that we're authorizing, and it's up to $8.1 million, is not going to fix all of those problems. It's not. And I think it would be incumbent on us to advise our parents if we can't fix those problems in terms of the distance piece particularly, which I'm going to just digress for a minute and say, this is the challenge of breaking apart a motion like this. It is a layered motion, layered on pieces of other pieces, because that's what safety protocols require. And so this 8.1 million is actually meant to address the problem of that 1 meter distance in however way it needs to be done. And I don't know that that's my role to decide how that needs to be done. I think it's an operational question in many respects, not a governance question. That being said, I have no concerns about asking Director Marsh to come back to us with a plan for using the reserves in terms of respecting what we have said, which is we want to keep our children and our staff as safe as possible by implementing minimum 1 meter physical distancing measures. So I can appreciate all of that. But I also appreciate this. The government announced today that the deficit has ballooned from around $18 million to $38 billion. They're not going to give us funding. It's been very clear, very, very clear. And we're certainly not going to get it if we don't do the things that we can do to keep students safe. I am not comfortable letting the government off the hook, which is the whole point of the rest of the motion. I am deeply disturbed at how little regard has been paid to the safety of the students and the families and our communities in this back to school plan. Children have been given less consideration than businesses in the community has been as they go to commercial establishments. It's extraordinary, but that is what we have. And so this part of the motion is meant to address the things we can do, not the things that are out of our control, but the things that are firmly within our control. And so to me, the very idea that we would not use reserve funds to do whatever we can to protect students and staff, to meet minimum safety requirements, is just not something that is tenable to me. And so I am clearly going to vote in favor of this part of the motion, not without reservation in terms of understanding the importance of those funds for really important programming, and in particular, the special education components. But I do think operationally, staff is in the best position to provide us with the information on how they intend to spend those funds. That's what we do in all budgeting processes, right? They give us their ideas and their plans and we decide. And so to me, this isn't different. It's exactly the same. And I think the one last thing that I would say about it is we're asking for a level of certainty right now that we are not affording parents. We are saying we need to know more to make this decision about spending money, but we are not giving parents that kind of certainty to make a decision that they have to make today. As a parent of a student in a school, I would want to know if we are doing everything we reasonably can to meet minimum safety requirements. That is what is at the heart of this motion. There is an urgency to it. And I am hopeful that the trustees appreciate that parents actually need that level of certainty to make the decisions we're asking them to make today. I also would like to say that if we are not going to be able to do that in all respects, that we have an obligation to inform all of those parents that have students that may be impacted by the inability to meet those minimum safety requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lundquist. So we'll go back to Trustee Barnes. You said you wanted to amend.
Chris, Patrice just she just texted me. She's in her car, so she asked me if I would read what her motion was because she's in the car. If that's okay with you.
That's fine with me. I was just going to say with motions like this amendment, it probably would have been helpful to all of us as the trustees, staff, and people online watching that this probably should have been dealt with at the beginning as we went through our speakers, so we could have had an opportunity to speak to it if it was past the amendment. But it would make things much easier if we could do something like that just out of a courtesy. But I'll allow you to read that, Trustee Barrett. Go ahead.
Not understanding your point on that, Chair Brainy, but we'll
just saying, you know what, if we had had it at the beginning, we then could have, because we went through a list of speakers, so now we might go through another list of speakers to the amendment. We could have spoken to it all at once. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just going to flip to my other screen here, is on section 3, the DDSB authorizes staff to be, I'm going to try and put her wording into it. The DSB authorizes staff to be able to develop a plan to utilize reserve funds up to the 1% to facilitate the adoption of the mitigation measures to keep student and staff as safe as possible, and to be able to present that plan back to the board of directors for consideration. I'm trying just to put her words into it here for you, Trustee Brainy. So,
thank you
Board
for
of
doing
Trustees.
that. Sorry, Trustee Crawford, you're not on the list yet.
I just corrected. It's Board of Trustees he meant.
That's correct. Yeah, I'm assuming. Yes, I believe that's her intention.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Barrett, for doing that. Do we have a seconder on that? Is that you, Trustee Crawford? Do you second
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So is this another one that we're going to recorded vote on? Since we've been doing that with everything else, I would imagine we should do the same. So our secretary, Kim Cox, can you take a recorded vote on that amendment?
Yes, so recorded vote on clause 3 as amended. Trustee Barnes, I'm assuming she's not able to.
I'm sorry, I actually didn't hear the entire motion, so I would amendment. So can I have it read back before we vote, please? I'm sorry to interrupt. I need to know what I'm voting on, and I missed pieces of it. It cut out, so I apologize.
Go ahead, Trustee Barrett.
Well, I was going to ask if Kim could read it as she recorded. That would really be helpful for me, Trustee Brainy.
Okay.
Chair Brainy, sorry.
The motion is moved by Trustee Michael Barrett that the DDSB authorizes staff to be able to develop a plan to utilize reserve funds up to 1% of the board's 2020 budget to facilitate the adoption of mitigation measures to keep students and staff as safe as possible, and that staff present a plan back to trustees for their consideration.
Is that clear to everyone?
Oh, 1% of the operating budget. Could we put a figure in there? Michael?
We could. I would just think that the 1% is a mathematical calculation of our operating budget, but
it does say operating budget, does it?
It does. It says operating budget, so that's
okay,
pretty clear. It's 1.8.13. Yeah,
that's fine.
Is that clear to everyone? Can we then go to a
And just a clarification, it does say up to 1%. Is that not correct?
Okay, so could we go, Kim, could you take a recorded vote on that?
Okay, clause 3 as amended. Trustee Barnes. This lister is absent. Trustee Barrett.
Oh, no, I do.
Oh, you do? Okay, you're here. Thank you. Trustee Barrett.
in favor.
Trustee Brainy.
In favor.
Trustee Crawford.
In favor.
Trustee Edwards.
In favor.
Trustee Forbes.
In favor.
Trustee Lundquist.
Oh, you are mute.
I'm opposed.
Trustee Morton.
In favor.
Trustee Noble.
In favor.
Trustee Templeton.
Opposed.
Trustee Thatcher. Trustee Thatcher.
In favor. Sorry, Kim.
Thank you. So 9 in favor, 2 opposed.
Okay, thank you, Kim. So Trustee Forbes, anything remaining?
Yes, there are. So the one is the DDSB create a program that encourages mask use for all students, subject to the duty to accommodate.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes. So speakers on that, we have Trustee Edwards. Do we have a seconder on that? We do, which Trustee Templeton, I believe, will second that that section also. So Trustee Edwards will go to you first, the speakers list, then Lundquist, Crawford, Noble.
I think it's really important that considering what the health concerns are, especially, and our students are going to be, that are arriving on the bus are going to have masks, that I think that the direction was always to encourage, but I think we have to be a little bit stronger. It says, you know, and that from all kids should be wearing them, recognizing that we have issues with the younger students wearing them and trying to wear them for that period of time as well. But I think it's to create the program where we have to make sure that we should start that now. There's videos out there how to put on a mask and take them off. And that we should be asking parents if they're going to be sending their child to start practicing that and start putting that out and recognizing it's not necessarily the best thing, but I think that we can start preparing them. So I agree that we should encourage, but I think it should just say that all students should wear them unless they cannot due to health reasons or whatever, the same wording that is put in through the health. And that we need to create a program. I totally agree with it.
Thank you. Trustee Lundquist?
So I actually have a point of order. There is some confusion, I think, over the last motion. So as it stands, it would look as though I'm on record as being opposed to the main motion, not the amendment, because it wasn't dealt with appropriately process-wise. So there should have been a vote to okay the amendment first, and then a vote on the amended motion.
Yeah, we should have voted on the amendment and then the motion as amended.
Okay. So we had the vote on the amendment. So we want to take a vote then on everything.
The motion as amended.
On the motion as amended.
We could do that and go back to that if you'd like to. That's what I thought that we had done, but that's obviously it wasn't. So we can do that. We can switch gears. So do we have, so you're moving that then, Trustee Lundquist, and obviously seconded by Trustee Templeton?
So no, I'm not moving anything. There was an amended motion that passed. So now we need to vote on the amendment to the motion passed. Now we need to vote on the, I'm sorry, because it sounds like I'm motion and I'm not. They are two separate things. So now we need to vote on the amended motion, whether we support or don't.
Okay. So let's do that then now at this stage. Could I have Secretary Cox do a recorded vote on this again?
Sure. Recorded vote on the motion as amended. Trustee Barnes?
Support.
Trustee Barrett?
In favor.
Trustee Brainy?
In favor.
Trustee Crawford?
Yes.
Trustee Edwards?
In favor.
Trustee Forbes?
Opposed.
Trustee Lundquist?
In favor.
Trustee Morton?
That's you, Carolyn.
I'm in favor.
Trustee Noble?
In favor.
Trustee Templeton?
In favor.
Trustee Thatcher?
In favor.
10 in favor, 1 opposed.
That carries. Thank you. So Trustee Lundquist, did you have something to offer to this next section because you were first up?
I just wanted to actually say thank you to Trustee Edwards. She had a conversation with me yesterday and she has raised some of those really important points. And the thing that strikes me as really important is if we're going to create a program for masking, for encouraging masking, we need to do it now. That it isn't enough to ask students to come to school prepared that way on the first day of school if we haven't actually done the groundwork up front. So I recognize that that's a big ask of staff in terms of putting something together in very short order, but it seems to me is fundamentally important if we're going to adopt a policy that encourages mask use for all students in a way that might actually be effective in terms of the first week of school, where there is significant risk if we don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Crawford?
Thank you. Yes, I think we should encourage masks for everyone. And if the argument is that children that young can't properly wear them, then maybe we should be thinking about maybe children that young shouldn't be invited back at this time, but certainly masks for everyone.
Trustee Noble?
Thank you, Chair Brainy. Masks are required in Durham region according to what the regional councillors have passed not too long ago. I do believe that we should do our best to ensure that all students, including K-3 students, are wearing masks. And I want to once again reference the public letter from ETBO and DECE that in their last paragraph do mention that wearing masks alongside social distancing will decrease the chances of COVID-19 spreading, and therefore I would be in favor of this motion.
Trustee Crawford? Trustee Forbes?
Thank you. I agree, especially if we're not able to always ensure social distancing of the 1 meter. Masks become that much more important as a tool to fight the spread. So I would also be in favor.
Thank you. Trustee Barrett?
I'm going to support it, but I'm going to suggest that the science doesn't necessarily support masking all children. We will be one of the few jurisdictions that are actually supporting masks under the age of 10. Quebec, they had no masks for elementary at all. And now this fall, they're going to masks for only individuals who are 10 plus, so ages 10 and over. And if you look at their record over the last school year, which they came back in May, there was no outbreak, there was no element. So I'm going to support it because I had an organization that every single person wears the masks all the time because I believe that in the sense of protection, but the science isn't necessarily supporting it fully. But I will support it fully. But there is a contradiction out there in the community. But there has been contradictions. I think we've alluded to that on many occasions with something we don't know what we're dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Trustee Crawford, then Trustee Morton.
Thank you. It just raises an interesting question. If science knows that masks don't work under the age of 10, then science must also know when it's safe to go back to school. So there must be some numbers that we can get on that. But as far as we're concerned, politically, masks should be worn by everyone.
Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you. I'm glad that we are using the verb encourages mask use because that's doing the best we can. We cannot force everybody because understanding 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, that wearing a mask will create anxiety for a lot of those youngsters, and we need to be aware of that. So I would encourage them, but I don't think we could force all of those primary students to wear a mask.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers to Trustee Lundquist?
I just want to confirm that we can't override the ministry on this anyway, and the ministry has been very clear. So it really is meant to encourage it as opposed to require it.
Yeah.
Okay, is everyone fine if we take a vote on this? Okay. Our Secretary Kim Cox, can you take a recorded vote on this then?
Yes, recorded vote on clause 4. Trustee Barnes?
I think Patrice put her hand up, so I think she's in. Are you in favor, Patrice? It doesn't say yes or no, it just has a hand up.
She's got the thumbs up now, Chris. I'm going to assume that's a yes.
Okay.
And I'm in favor as well.
Okay, so Trustee Barnes is in favor, Trustee Barrett's in favor, I'm in favor.
Thank you. Trustee Crawford?
Yes.
Trustee Edwards?
In favor.
Trustee Forbes?
In favor.
Trustee Lundquist?
In favor.
Trustee Morton? Trustee Morton,
That's you, Carolyn, again. She's frozen, I think, Trustee Brainy.
Based on her comments, I don't want to say, I would say that she's in favor.
I can come back to her at the end.
Okay.
Trustee Noble,
In favor.
Trustee Templeton,
In favor.
Trustee Thatcher,
In favor.
and Trustee Morton. I think we may have lost her.
I don't want to say, but it carries anyways, but I think
Yes.
it's say that she probably is in favor. So,
Okay.
all right. And if she does come on, she can certainly correct that, but I would say that carries anyway. So thank you, Kim. Trustee Forbes, so what's up next?
Okay. Motion 5 is the DDSB immediately provide a strongly worded letter to the Ministry of Education expressing its grave concern about the failure to use small class sizes as a priority safety strategy and urging the government to immediately provide all funding necessary to all school boards to ensure a full hierarchy of safety controls can be put in place as schools reopen, including funds to provide additional staff to create smaller and safer cohorts in elementary schools and additional funding for upgrades/improvements to the ventilation in DDSB schools.
Okay, thank you. So Trustee Barrett, and then I have Trustee Morton. She's back on, actually, she's back on. Trustee Morton, are you online again? Carolyn, can you?
I am.
Yes,
and I was very support.
Okay, so I was correct with that. I just didn't want to assume, but
Yes,
based on
I
your
was
comments.
supportive of that motion.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn, and we'll keep you on the speakers list for your next after Trustee Barrett. Go ahead, Trustee Barrett.
Yes, thank you, Chair Brainy. What I was going to do is to make an amendment, and what I was going to include in that motion was Trustee Lundquist, point 6, which is the same as already read out, but that we would add that the DDSB publicly release a copy of that letter in form of a press release in order to be able to kind of squeeze the process a bit there, Trustee Brainy.
Okay. Thank you.
So that would be typically, that would be technically an amendment. So you'd have to, Chris, get a seconder and then
seconder on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
I will second that.
Okay, Trustee Lundquist, second that. And do we have any speakers to that? Seeing none. So let's go to a recorded vote on that amendment. Go ahead, Secretary.
Recorded vote on clause 5, including point 6. Trustee Barnes,
In favor.
Trustee Barrett,
In favor.
Trustee Brainy,
In favor.
Trustee Crawford,
Yes.
Trustee Edwards,
In favor.
Trustee Forbes,
In favor.
Trustee Lundquist,
In favor.
Trustee Morton,
In favor.
Trustee Noble,
In favor.
Trustee Templeton,
In favor.
Trustee Thatcher.
In favor.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me go back to speakers on the on that section of the motion. Anybody up?
Excuse me, Chair.
Go ahead. Yes.
I made an error when I voted on section 3. I think I was confused. So I hate to ask this, but I would like to vote with I would like to make a motion to reconsider motion 3 and to vote in favor with my fellow trustees because I was confused. So
No, I understand. I'm fine with just accepting that. Just going. Is anybody opposed to that suggestion? Okay. Thank you, Trustee Forbes. We'll correct that in the minutes and the recorded vote.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments on this section, or can we go right to a vote on this? Okay, let's go to a vote then. Kim, could you do a recorded vote on that?
Yes. On clause 5 as amended, trustee Barnes,
You back on, Patrice?
In favor.
Okay, perfect.
trustee Barrett,
In favor.
trustee Brainy,
In favor?
trustee Crawford,
In favor.
trustee Edwards,
In favor.
trustee Forbes,
In favor.
trustee Lundquist,
In favor.
trustee Morton,
In favor?
trustee Noble,
In favor.
trustee Templeton,
In favor.
trustee Thatcher.
In favor.
Thank you.
So trustee Forbes?
There are no more motions that were included in the email.
Perfect. So just check something here. So is there anything else, trustee Barrett? I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I don't want to prolong this. I can well appreciate, but I am wondering, hearing from a number of parents for JK and SK, and understanding that that's probably the biggest transition for children who are now entering school for the first time. I have been an advocate for at least 8 or 9 years on a graduated implementation of JK-SK, where we don't necessarily have all students for JK and SK start on the same day. And I think that within the COVID environment, it absolutely makes sense as we are trying to teach our newest members of our school system the routines of school. Would it not make sense then to be able to do a graduated start to school for JK and SK that we would see full implementation, let's say after 2 weeks? As opposed to having all these young individuals coming into school on the same day with masks and all the other pieces that we put together. So I guess I'd like to be able to, if staff thinks that that's really, really a ridiculous idea, and I'm okay, Nora, if you say that, but I will say that I'm consistent. Typically every year I bring this up again. I'm just wondering if that would not make more sense for the JK and SK. Understanding that, because trustee Crawford has asked on many occasions, can we alter the start of school? And we cannot. But JK and SK are not required pieces. So could we do that? And I know other school boards do this. So I'm seeking your opinion, and I'm okay if you say, can we do it another year? But just looking for some thoughts.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Brainy. Trustee Barrett, as an educator, I definitely see the value and importance of a staggered reentry for learners who are first arriving to school, especially the self-regulation that is required to be explicitly taught in those first few days as far as classroom routines, and understand that in this environment, there will be more routines required. So I think staff would do as directed by the board in this instance. The one caution that I would have is that the Ministry of Education may take a different view to instructional days and families having access to education during an instructional day, and for us to limit attendance based on a staggered reentry. But if the board directs us, we would very much put that program into place. Just wanted to flag that there is a risk there.
Okay, so that being the case, because I don't want to actually create extra work through you, Chair Brainy, what I'd like to do then is to be able to put forward a motion that the Board of Trustees instruct staff to be able to implement a graduated return to school for JK-SK or over a period of 2 weeks. Just give me a smile, or if that 2 weeks works for you, Nora. Okay, so I'd like to put that forward, Chair Brainy, if I could.
Yeah.
I would second that motion.
Second, trustee Lundquist. Any speakers to that motion? I know there's trustee Crawford and Noble have their hands up. Are you speaking to that motion?
I was going to add an item to the thing, but I support that because obviously as a safety factor, that would be safer than than the present system. Maybe by only a small percentage, but safer. So I support.
Thank you. Trustee Noble?
Yes, I was going to say that I believe this is something that the unions who teach our youngest learners are in favor of, and therefore I would be very in favor of supporting Trustee Barrett's motion.
Okay. So can we go to a recorded vote on that motion then? Secretary Cox?
Yes, recorded vote. Trustee Barnes?
In favor.
Trustee Barrett?
In favor.
Trustee Brainy?
In favor.
Trustee Crawford?
In favor.
Trustee Edwards?
In favor.
Trustee Forbes?
In favor.
Trustee Lundquist?
In favor.
Trustee Morton?
Definitely in favor.
Trustee Noble?
In favor.
Trustee Templeton?
In favor.
Trustee Thatcher?
In favor.
Thank you.
Okay, now I see Trustee Crawford, Noble, and Lundquist have their hands up.
Yes, Mr. Chair, what I wanted to do was add an item to this because one of the important things that came up and has been discussed here is the transportation. I think we should speak to that.
Okay, it wasn't an item that was on our agenda. We did have
the motion.
We did have a conversation the other night. It's up to certainly the will of the trustees. If it's this,
I think it would be, we wouldn't be doing the public a favor if we didn't speak to this, because it's obviously quite different than the other program we put in place, and it's singularly the most dangerous thing that we're doing right now by not having spacing on busing.
no, I understand, Trustee Crawford. I just because it wasn't on the agenda, I don't know if it gives really staff an opportunity to have the accurate information if we're having a conversation about it. I'm not sure what the will of the trustees are if we want to continue.
If I may suggest, the motion that is in front of us can be amended by adding things to it. Trustee Barrett just did that.
Yes.
So I'm suggesting we speak to the problem of transportation, which was part of the presentation the other night and has been part of the letters that have been coming in.
Okay. We would need a second of what are the will of the trustees on this scenario? Trustee Lundquist, your hand's up there. Do you have any suggestions?
I do, because I actually have a not dissimilar concern, although I'm wondering about a potential change to the process. So it seems to me, and I expressed alarm at the transportation plan on Monday night, and I remain incredibly perplexed by it. But it seems to me that we need information. So I was going to propose that we invite the Chief Medical Officer of Health of Durham Region to come and to provide us with some insight and information that might be useful for us in terms of understanding risks to students. And I was also going to suggest that staff provide us with information on what, if any, steps we actually can take with respect to student busing in light of the fact that it is provided by a consortium that is not us. So what levers do we have to actually push for significant changes to the busing policy?
Trustee Edwards?
I agree with what the process as far as Nikki, Trustee Lundquist has said, and that we do need that information and make it and an understanding for everyone what we can do around that. I know we talked about the letter. I think that we still need to, in that letter, I think transportation is a huge issue because we're not meeting the needs, and maybe that's something else that we could add to that letter. We know that right now what the plan is. And just so other trustees are aware, I sent emails to the Central East boards to find out what their busing plans were, because I couldn't find them implemented. And I was sent either emails confirming that the boards are, most of the boards are doing the same as what we are doing, 2 per seat. In one case, one board is as normal as what they normally do, so that includes 3 per seat. But they're still like providing masks for drivers, etc. So so that was another thing that I was trying to, so that way I can gather some additional information from some of the other boards. But I have I have gotten all the boards within the Central East District, and they're all doing similar plans.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Edwards. In regards, I would agree with that. Regards to the letter too, just so everybody know, just like with our last one, it will be sent to all the trustees to weigh in on that before anything's sent out too, so that we can make sure it's the best letter to the intent that we wanted it to be. Trustee Morton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Brainy. As of Monday night, when we heard the DSTS proposal, I was disturbed along with many other people. I'm glad that Trustee Lundquist has put forward the idea about inviting the Board of Health to weigh in on this. I also think we need to wait until after today and determine how many of our students are going to be riding that bus, how many have chosen to stay at home with in remote learning on this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Trustee Morton. So before we go to you, Trustee Crawford, just wanted to ask, based on what everybody's had to say, I'm certainly in agreement that maybe we should park this until we get that information put forward. But I do agree that it's an extremely important conversation. I think we all do. Are you okay with just putting this on hold, Trustee Crawford, till we could get that information, then we can have a more fulsome discussion regarding that?
Yes, I am in favor of that, and I would like to add to it at the same time, we want to have a discussion about the threat ratio, but specifically about the buses.
Okay.
And I would be happy with having a separate meeting on that, yes.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Crawford. So seeing that we are at the adjournment portion of our agenda, would somebody like to move adjournment the meeting? Trustee Edwards, and I see the only person I see on the screen, Trustee Lundquist. Can you second that? Yeah, okay. And all in favor? Seeing none opposed. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.